What's going on, you guys? TBR here, back yet again with another King of Fighters All-Star video. In today's video, we are going to be doing another spotlight video. This time we are going to be taking a look at one of the most controversial characters from the Street Fighter V collab. Of course, that is going to be Bison. We're going to be running him through his paces and all things PVE and giving you guys our final thoughts on this character. Now, just for those of you who have not been keeping track, I have been playing with this character since day one. I was able to get him to A4 on day one, and subsequently I have gotten him to A5. So I do have a pretty firm grasp on just how much damage and just how well this character is going to be able to perform. So we're going to be talking today about all the things good and bad about this character. But before we go ahead and get into all of that and more, make sure if you guys haven't already done so and you enjoy daily King of Fighters All-Star content that you smash that like button and subscribe. And let's go ahead and get into the spotlight for Bison. Cue that intro. Alright, you guys, so as always, timestamps will be active in the description. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the spotlight video for Bison. So first and foremost, the things that you're going to want to know right on a surface level are the fact that this is going to be an SS character. That means you can use SS generic memories in order to build him up, and he is also going to have access to things such as the SS exclusive option cards, as well as the SS exclusive set cards, something that is very important for him, and we will talk about when we get to the cards. With that being said, he is going to be a red defensive type character with a leadership ability that increases defense type fighters' attack by 40% and their critical rate by 10%. Again, kind of like we talked about in the Akuma spotlight, very similar leadership skill to that one, and therefore it is not anything I would say you'll probably ever really be using. Now, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the cores. Right off the top, we are going to have that 30% power charge rate increase we love to see, and then as we get into the generic cores, things start to get pretty good. I mean, everything here is okay. We don't have anything that stands out as being anything that is going to be too off-putting. We have an increase to our defense, our attack, we have a skill enhance to our strike and our blast, as well as a crit rate increase. So in general, not as stacked as we saw with a character like Akuma, but still pretty solid nonetheless. However, as we have always said, the most important thing about the cores is always going to be the exclusive cores, so let's start talking about those. First up here we have Psycho Power. Now, Psycho Power increases active skill damage by 320% to targets affected by darkness, really good, on a cooldown of 5 seconds. So for a short 5-second cooldown, we are increasing our active skill damage by 320% to targets affected by darkness. This is going to be really nice for his overall damage output, but we're going to be talking about his damage output quite a bit in this video. So, next up here, we have a 30% chance to apply fear to the attacker for 3 seconds when attacked on a cooldown of 13 seconds. So this right here isn't anything too special. I would prefer to see something to where we were applying the fear by attacking an enemy that was affected by a specific dot. Maybe something that applied that to every enemy, kind of like we saw with Akuma or some of these other characters in the past, where we're able to go ahead and apply that fear to everybody on the board in PVE. However, it is still nice to have fear on the kit nonetheless. And then we have a PvP exclusive of a 10% chance to deal damage equal to 30% of the target's max HP when attacking targets with less than 30% HP. This is really, really good in PvP, and in general, this is going to be a character that is absolutely dominant in PvP, so therefore, this is going to be a character that, honestly, you may end up, if you're somebody that's a big championship player, or you love things such as Dream Match, yet this is going to be a character you'll probably want to take a look at because he is an absolute monster there. So, really good core for PvP. The rest of these, though, leave a little bit to be desired, which is going to be a bit of a theme with this character going through the kit. Next up, we have Shadowlu's Leader. This is going to give us a 40% chance to reset our active skill cooldowns upon attacking targets affected by darkness, guard included, on a cooldown of 15 seconds. This, in my opinion, is probably his best PvE core, being the fact that we can reset all of our active skills is very nice. It has a 15-second cooldown, which isn't anything that is too egregious, and in general, this tends to be, in my opinion, one of his best overall core effects. Then we have a PvP exclusive that reflects 20% of damage received for 5 seconds when attacked on a cooldown of 13 seconds. Again, this is a character that is extremely good for PvP. And I'm sure you guys have already heard that, you've already seen that, you may have experienced it yourself. This is a character that is very devastating there. So, with that all out of the way, we do have the Street Fighter V exclusive core. Not much to talk about here, we've already talked about this before, I'll briefly go into it. We increase our attack by 40% if our HP is 50% or more, which is very important for this character. And then we're going to be decreasing our damage received by 8% each time HP decreases by 10. And this stacks up to 5. So in general, kind of like we've already established, this is a very cool, very interesting exclusive core for these fighters that they all share, and in general, it is going to be even just that much more important for this character to keep himself above that 50% threshold, because he needs this buff. So, with all that out of the way, let's talk about the skills. First and foremost on the skills, I do want to go ahead and talk about weaken here. Typically I would do this when we get to the EX stuff, but I want to talk about something here. So this right here is going to be the EX skill that I would prefer on my Bison. Now this is going to be weaken. He has the option of max as well, which we'll briefly touch on, but I would prefer to have weaken here. As you guys can see, this can be used when attacked, and it's limited to standing, airborne, and knockdown, so you can pretty much toss this out whenever. It has a PVE exclusive of resetting all of our active skill cooldowns upon using it, of course, just like the rest. And then it increases all enemies' damage received by 30% for 15 seconds upon use. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of crooked team runs in Guild Raid using Bison as a support. The reason being is, one, he is able to fire off his finishers extremely quickly because he's able to gain his power very quickly, and he's also very quick. However, this right here is going to be the big reason, because you're going to be able to increase all enemies' damage received by 30% for 15 seconds, which is a nice drop, and it also has a really long duration. So in general, this is really good just to pop off and then let one of your attackers, such as maybe like an Akuma or whoever your damage dealer is, go to town using this buff. So in general, this is really good. It's a very nice debuff to the enemy, and you will see this being used to great effect in team runs in Guild Raid. Not necessarily anything he's probably going to be using very often himself, but at the same time, very good as a support system, and I would definitely recommend this one over max. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about the skills. First up here, we have a strike skill on head press. Now this is going to be our hyper armor and interrupt. As you guys can see, it is going to be able to be used while standing or airborne. And then we have hyper armor for 3 seconds, so pretty standard stuff. And then we use this to increase our attack by 70% for 5 seconds. So that is going to be a nice jump for our attack, as well as giving us the standard hyper armor on an interrupt. So that is going to be standard fare. Now, we have a couple of blast skills to follow up here. First up, we have Psycho Blast EX, which again is a blast skill. We use this to increase our attack by a further 70% for 5 seconds, and apply Blackout to the target for 7 seconds upon landing a skill, guard included, which then deals darkness damage equal to 30% of attack every 1 second, and decreases power gauge by 2%. Of course, Blackout is your tier 2 version of darkness. So really good stuff there. And then we have a PvP exclusive, another one. This one is going to disable all enemies' active skills for 1.5 seconds upon use. Again, you guys, this is a character that is an absolute behemoth in PvP. Overall, pretty good little skill, another really nice attack buff, but we're going to be talking about those attack buffs momentarily once we get through the skills, because this character is a bit wonky. Now, Psycho Inferno EX is going to be the third skill. It is another blast skill, and this is going to increase the target's damage received by 45% for 5 seconds upon landing a skill. It also applies Venom, This is very important because we do not see poison or venom on a ton of these characters. This is actually one that we don't see as often as things such as burn. So it's really nice to see this on here. So he does have mixed dot coverage of darkness as well as poison, which is really, really solid. And then he also has a 70% chance to remove the target's hyper armor or shield upon landing a hit. Again, something that comes into play more often in PvP, and again, makes him very devastating there. So those are going to be the regular skills. Let's talk about the finishers. First up here, you are going to want to know that both of these finishers are going to be strike skills. And then the first one here is going to be the core finisher, which is a really goofy finisher. So the core finisher is interesting. Against mobs, it's actually really, really good. Against anything that it can push around, it is extremely strong. It groups mobs up, it gets them all together, it basically just vacuums them all up, and it's really strong there. Against things such as bosses in Guild Raid, or things like the Spider Robot, or anything that can't be moved by it, it actually tends to be kinda sus. So this is going to be a finisher that you can do things to exploit it and kind of work around, because really what's going to happen with this thing is you are going to end up a lot of the time on the opposite side of the screen of any of those unmovable bosses. But what you can kind of do, and I've told you guys this before, and you can see this in some of the Guild Raid footage, typically what I like to do with this finisher is I like to try and use it in a corner. So basically what I mean by that is I try to be on the closest side to the corner as possible whenever I use it. So that way, because most of the hits and the damage are going to be on the tail of it, where Bison is going to be, for more lack of a better term, retreating from the boss to the other side of the screen. If he has nowhere to go because he's in a corner, you're basically going to be able to connect all those. So you can work around it. It also works as a really good retreat button in things such as against Nightmare Geese to get away from him when he's using that ground aura, but at the same time, it is a little bit wonky. However, it does have an effect on it. It is going to inflict darkness damage equal to 35% of attack to all enemies every 1 second for 10 seconds upon use. In general, this has got really good shield shred if you can hit all those hits, but again, because the animation is very wonky with it, it does leave a lot to be desired, and it is a fairly quick animation also as a core finisher. And then we have the 3PG finisher, which we're going to actually just take a look at here because it does have an effect. So let's go ahead and do that. So one of the really nice things about Psycho Crusher is going to be that it is going to be a extremely long cinematic finisher. It has a ton of multi-hits. It is a very good shield shredding overall 3PG skill, but it also recovers our HP by 8% when using it. So this is going to give him some sustain and some onboard heal. This is something that is very important for his overall survivability as a defensive type character, especially when we talk about the EX scoreboard here in a moment, which you would think that those things that we're going to be talking about would make this character's survivability on top of this just so good that he's going to be able to stick around in most any fight. Well, you'd be mistaken. This is a character that again is kind of wonky and doesn't really know whether he wants to be an attack type or a defensive type with the way that he is built, and I really don't know what Netmarble was thinking with a lot of the decisions behind this kit. But with this recovery by 8%, it is really nice. However, we're going to be talking about a few things here that are going to apply to that, at least loosely. So let's go ahead and talk about what everybody else is talking about. I'm sure you guys have seen. Big shout out to my boy IRUNMAN'S, Snow, as well as Forgo Nation. I think even did a video on it today. But basically, I'm not going to go into every little detail and compare this to everybody like a lot of them have. If you guys want to check their videos out, you can do so. But when it comes to the controversy behind the EX core board for Bison, basically what you guys need to pay attention to here is this. If you guys take a look here, you'll see that I have my attack maxed out, right? And then if you look here, we have a max stat with all 25 points into attack here of 1250, right? So let's go ahead and briefly look at Akuma as a good comparable. His at 25 is 5500, right? So basically, if you look at almost any of these other characters, 5500, 5300, and so on. Bison has very little that he is getting as far as attack with his EX core board, which is going to affect him egregiously when it comes to his overall performance when it comes to the EX version of this character. Now, this is something that is very odd when you consider the fact that a lot of these other characters, as I just showed you guys, have way more. And basically what happened, if you check out IRUNMAN'S video, he did email Netmarble about this, and they did get back to him, and they said that this is not a bug, this is intended. And what they did is they went ahead and they actually padded his defense, right? Because he is a defensive type character. Now, where I say this character is kind of wonky, and we don't need to talk about the comparison between these two, because I already told you guys Weaken's better than Max in my opinion, because it's just a better overall support skill. But really what is weird about this character is, and I had already mentioned that he can't really decide whether he's an attack type or a defensive type. You're going to have remembered from the skills that we have an increase to our attack by 70% here, and then we also had, where was it here? An increase to our attack by 70% here, and then if we look at the cores again real quick here, we don't really have anything that is going to be increasing our defense anywhere. Everything is going to be an increase to our attack, right? This character can't decide what he is, and that's kind of his problem. It's a very odd build that Netmarble finalized and decided on, and if you guys are wondering why he doesn't do as much damage as some of these other Street Fighter V characters, that's a big reason as to why. Now, what's really nice about him is he is extremely quick. He has really strong shield shred, especially if you can get the proper dot on. He has some amazing shield shred with the proper dot applied in Guild Raid, but this character's damage is markedly lower than a lot of these other characters, and it is very important to note that. So, with that being said, the EX core board is very sus. So, in general, you guys, I've already said pick Weaken over Max. In general, though, when it comes to the stat issues here, again, if you guys want to check any of those other videos out for a more detailed description and breakdown, you may do so, but that is not going to be the main topic of today's video, so we're going to move on. I just needed to make sure that I mentioned that here. Now, let's talk about cards as far as what we would recommend on this character. Now, first and foremost, when it comes to the set cards, the first thing I would say is the 1000 Blows set is going to be very, very, very strong on this character. Now, this is going to be the banner set currently for the Street Fighter V collaboration. This increases Street Fighter V fighters' active skill damage by 25%. It increases their attack by 20% for 5 seconds when a Street Fighter V fighter lands an active skill, and they also become immune to damage for 3 seconds when their HP is 10% or less on a cooldown of 35 seconds. This is a really strong set on this character, and in general is one of the best overall sets that you could possibly use on him, and I would highly recommend that you do so. The next set I want to go ahead and talk about, though, is one that you don't hear about a lot, and this is one that you guys have seen me use to great effect. A lot of people have asked me how I've gotten such good damage with this character, considering the fact that everybody thinks that he hits like Choi, which is not the case. That's because a lot of times I use this set. Now, this set, he doesn't have all blast skills, keep that in mind, but this set does tend to show that it does very, very well on him. Now, this increases Special Signature Fighter's active skill damage by 25%, and he is an SS character, so keep that in mind. It also increases his attack by 20% for 5 seconds upon a Special Signature Fighter landing a blast skill. And then it has a PvP exclusive that decreases damage received from enemies with super or hyper armor by 50%, which really isn't anything we need to talk about here. So in general, this is a set that I've used quite a bit and to great effect on him. I would highly recommend, if you guys have it, to test it out on him. You may find that it improves your numbers. I've really liked this set with him in general, and I've fallen back on this one quite often. I would say the 1000 Blows set is probably going to be slightly better, but this is a really good fallback option. And then finally, as a good little runner-up, I'll go ahead and mention the 7 Night set. This one's going to increase our darkness damage. The problem is with Bison, he doesn't have any explosion, right? And being the fact that he does not have explosion, it really isn't all that important to go in and be buffing his dots as much as a character like Akuma, who does have spammable 5.5 times explosion. This character does not have that. So it's just another thing that this character does not have that you would normally see on a lot of these characters that people have become accustomed to, that does neuter his damage. So keep that in mind. You don't necessarily need to worry about buffing his dots that much, but if you wanted to, you could easily do so, and it's not a bad idea. This is a really solid set on him nonetheless. And then we have an exclusive option like any of the other Street Fighter V characters, so let's talk about that here. So basically, this one's going to increase our attack by 5%, it's going to decrease our skill cooldowns by 1.2 seconds, and it's going to increase darkness damage dealt by 60% for 5 seconds upon using an active skill. So in general, going back to what we had just mentioned about him not having any explosion, this is something that you are going to kind of more or less, you could take or leave. This isn't a option card that I would say is an absolute must-have on him. Reason being is, me personally, I would rather use some of the SS option cards. Like, for instance, I'm of the opinion if you can ever use this thing on anybody, use it, because it's just that good. And this guy right here is going to be something he is open to using because he is an SS character. So you can play around with it. This is a really good option card in general. It just isn't one that I feel like is as important to him as some of the option cards are to some of these other characters, because they have explosion, and that's very, very important to note. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about stones, right? So in my opinion, I have not tested this, obviously, because I don't have a full set of stones to test it with. Right now, all I have are just the Street Fighter V attack stones, so that's what I'm using on him. As far as my moonstone, I just have a poison double attack stone here, which is really good, and then I have this guy here, which is just going to be a silver attack darkness stone. My recommendation would be just go ahead and do this. You don't need to go ahead and go crazy, because honestly, our stones cost a ton of hammers and resources, because you can't use the Street Fighter V hammers on those, obviously, so they end up being very expensive. He doesn't have spammable explosion, so having our stones in general isn't all that important on him. I would say that honestly, you're better off just going with the Street Fighter V stones, or you can go ahead and mix and match SS stones as well. The SS stones in general would probably be another really good way to go, because you can go ahead and pinpoint specific ones that you would want on him if you wanted to really go ahead and overclock him and try to get the most amount of damage out of him possible. But if you want to go ahead and just settle on the Street Fighter V suite, you can do that and you'll be just fine. I would say also on top of that, you could go ahead and just go ahead with the Star and the Moonstones and try to buff either your poison or your darkness, and you'll be in good shape. Either way, again, he doesn't have explosion, so just kind of go ahead and decide there what you want to do with what you've got available to you. Obviously, that would be the way to go at that point. So, with all that out of the way, that's pretty much going to do it for the overall kit. This character in general, we'll talk about it in our final thoughts, and we'll kind of talk about it as we go through the footage, is very odd, very interesting, but very odd. He has some very sloppy build going on in his kit, in my opinion at least, and I do feel like it does hamper him quite a bit, but at the same time, people act like this character's terrible. He's not terrible. He's just not the best character in the game. However, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at our fame, and then we can go ahead and get into the footage. So that way you guys know exactly what's going on here. This is going to be my red fame, so that's what's going to be pertinent to today's footage, and that is what you're going to see there. So, with all that out of the way, you guys, that is going to be the breakdown. Let's go ahead and get into the footage and see what he's capable of in PvE. In mobbing and bossing, M. Bison is actually very strong, thanks to the fact that he has extremely forgiving animations on all of his skills. He's extremely quick, and he's going to be able to put up really respectable damage, as well as being able to spam his finishers very well. This is going to be a character that can go in and delete most mobs with ease. Now, whereas the core finisher is going to be a bit of a downside for this character in certain modes, it's actually very beneficial in mobbing, especially considering the fact that it is going to be able to pretty much group up the mobs very well. So in general, his mobbing ability is nice, but his damage is going to be a bit of a problem against higher level mobs. When we get into bossing, this is really where the damage starts to rear its ugly head as far as it being lower than a lot of these other uber tier characters. So unfortunately, M. Bison is not going to be able to go in and just straight up bully a lot of these higher level bosses in PvE. He is going to have a bit of a problem when it comes to being able to do a lot of really strong burst damage, because he does lack that 5.5 times explosion. So in general, when it comes to his overall bossing, you're going to be leaning back on using your finishers quite often, which isn't a problem. It just feels a little bit outdated by comparison to some of these other characters out there right now that are able to go in and just straight up nuke most of these bosses off the face of the map. So it's going to be one of those situations with this character where really you're going to need to play around with your build, whether it be because of your stones or your cards, whatever it is, in order to get as much out of him as possible, just so that way he's able to perform even close to some of the levels of some of the uber tier characters. But at the end of the day, Bison is not bad in these regards. He just leaves a little bit to be desired, and therefore is definitely going to pass this test, but not with flying colors. To be honest with you guys, Bison is an absolute behemoth when it comes to PVAI and any type of PvP mode. This is honestly probably going to be where he shows his relevance for the longest amount of time. If you need just a really strong PVAI or PvP character, Bison is a top tier pick and an amazing PvP character. Ah yes, Guild Raid, let's talk about Bison, shall we? So Bison is a character in Guild Raid that has major flaws, but is still extremely powerful. So let's go ahead and point out some of the things about this character that we like the most. When it comes to Bison, really the things that you're going to notice about him is he is going to have phenomenal shield shred with the proper dot applied to the boss. So this means because he does have mixed dot coverage of poison and darkness, that Bison is going to be able to go in and bully any of the bosses or modes where those are going to be pertinent, because he is going to have such phenomenal shield shred on his finishers especially, that this is going to be a character that can really just delete shields very quickly, and that is something that is going to be to his benefit in a huge way. You guys have already seen a lot of my damage numbers with this character in a lot of these different modes, so you pretty much already know from those showcases just how much damage this character can put up whenever he is going to be having the proper dot applied. Against Omega Rugal is really where this character is going to shine the most, because he is going to be able to go in and kind of bully Omega Rugal for the most part. When it comes to things such as Inferno difficulty especially, he is very impressive on his overall performance and damage numbers, and because he is a defensive type character, he is going to be able to stay in the fight a lot longer than a character that is a glass cannon, such as an Akuma or a Ryu, without even needing Nostalgia Chun-Li necessarily in order to keep him alive as a striker, thanks in no small part to the fact that he does boast a heal on his 3PG card finisher. However, there are going to be some major drawbacks to this character in this regard. Of course, we have to talk about the lower damage that he's going to be doing by comparison to a lot of other characters. However, in my opinion, and this could just be my opinion, however, for me, this is a character that still puts up ridiculous numbers by comparison to a lot of the previous meta, and by previous meta, I mean characters that came out before Street Fighter V. He's still going to be able to go in against Omega Rugal in Inferno difficulty as an example and put up over 4 billion damage solo, which is extremely powerful. However, where this character really shines is going to be as a support character, especially thanks to Weaken on his EX skill for a team run. If you guys haven't seen some of the team runs out there with the ridiculously high numbers that you are seeing using this character on a full team, it is because he is able to go in as a really solid support and help his team out a lot when it comes to their damage output, which is really where I think this character is going to be shining the most over the longest amount of time. This isn't necessarily a character I would say you would want to go in and use as a solo artist, quote unquote, especially in things such as Nightmare Geese, because with Nightmare Geese, this character isn't going to be as bulky as a lot of people might think as a defensive type character. Again, this goes back to what we talked about in our breakdown of the kit, where this character does seem like he's not quite sure whether he wants to be an attack type or a defensive type. He doesn't seem to be able to do either of them to full effect, and unfortunately, this rears its ugly head against Nightmare Geese, especially in things such as Inferno difficulty, because he is going to be taking a ton of damage, but in general, a super solid character nonetheless. Against Immortals, Bison is very impressive, but he's not perfect. Now, when it comes to M. Bison's performance against Immortals, the first big thing that you're going to take note of is going to, of course, be that extremely long cinematic 3PG card finisher, which is very, very beneficial for him. Unfortunately, however, on the other side of that coin, the core finisher leaves a ton to be desired against Immortals, specifically because you cannot push them around with it. So this is going to be another section where this is not going to be a finisher that is going to necessarily be that desirable. However, thanks to the fact that he does have access to things such as Weaken for a team, this is going to make him a very nice complementary piece yet again, as well as the fact that he is able to put up extremely nice damage, even if it isn't going to be as strong as a character such as Akuma or Ryu or Luke or the like. He is still going to be able to go in and do the job and get it done. Another thing to note is he does have that mixed dot coverage of poison and darkness. So in general, M. Bison, while not perfect here, is still an amazing character for Immortals, and I would highly recommend that if you are still needing help in Immortals, that you try him out, because you may be impressed by the overall performance he puts up. So now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the bonus clips. So with Mecha Spider B1000, as you guys are going to see here, you're going to be able to tell two different things. One, you're going to be able to tell just how much of a difference this character is going to be able to put up as far as his damage numbers by comparison to some of the elite Uber tier characters in the game, which is definitely a marked downgrade when it comes to M. Bison versus the field, but he's still able to put up extremely respectable, extremely strong numbers. So it is one of those things where if you are a greed player that is just wanting the most amount of damage humanly possible out of your characters, you may find him to be lackluster, but in general, he's still going to be extremely powerful nonetheless, and that really isn't up for debate. It pretty much is inherent with the numbers here. It's just that he isn't going to be putting up anywhere near the ridiculous amount of damage that the rest of the field is going to as far as the Uber tier is concerned. But against Spider Robot, as you guys can see, still very strong, respectable numbers, and a really solid overall pick. And then finally, the last bonus clip I'm going to put in here is going to be against the wary Colossal, just so that way you guys can see just how he performs here against this boss. And unfortunately for M. Bison, he isn't necessarily going to be, in my opinion, the most amazing thing in the world here. However, thanks to the fact that he does have access to things such as Weaken, this is going to be, in my opinion, the best thing about him against the wary Colossal. So that means that this character, again, is going to be a strong complementary piece to a team. So I do think that, honestly, there is a ton of value in using him if you pick Weaken as your EX skill. I think that that's probably going to be the best thing that you could pick for him, and the biggest reason why you would want to use him here. Otherwise, his damage numbers leave a lot to be desired. At the end of the day, M. Bison has much lower damage than the Uber tier characters before him, as well as having an extremely inconsistent and odd kit. However, he shines as a complementary piece in PVE for a team, as well as being a top tier character for things such as PvP. Well, there you have it, you guys. The spotlight video for M. Bison. So, what are my final thoughts and my rating for this character? In general, M. Bison is odd. He is a very wonky character as far as build goes. He does lack a lot of the things that you would normally see on top tier characters nowadays. Things that are meta effects such as explosion, especially a 5.5 times explosion. He doesn't have a shield, and he does lack the damage that a lot of these other characters do carry along with them. So he is going to be a character that you may find yourself a little bit disappointed in if you go ahead and overbuild him. For me personally, this is a 7 out of 10 character. This is a character that is kind of middle of the road. I feel like the real strength of this character lies in his shield shred ability, in the places where he's going to be able to exploit his dots, because that really is going to be something he's very strong at, as well as being an amazing complementary piece to a team run in Guild Raid using his Weaken EX skill. But in general, I feel like this is a character that, because he does lack those things, and because they did decide for whatever reason, to take the EX core board for him and make it into something that honestly isn't overly complementary to the rest of his kit. I feel like this is a character that's just in a weird spot, but in general, I do not regret building this character at all whatsoever. This is a character that is a bit of a personal favorite from Street Fighter for me, so this is a character that I'm quite the fan of. And as you guys can see in this video, as you saw with the footage, this is a character that is able to put up really, really high numbers. It's just very unfortunate. We are very spoiled nowadays. The power creep has done so, and now we are at a point where even the numbers that he's putting up aren't enough. So in general, it's going to be one of those things where while he does have niche uses and he is going to be extremely strong as a complementary piece to a team in Guild Raid, I feel like this is a character that really honestly, outside of some niche uses, isn't really anything that is going to be that much of a must-have. If you do end up being able to build him, I would say that he's worth building. You'll get those memories if you're going for Akuma maybe, and you're deciding what you want to do with those. Well, what else are you going to do besides build him up? You might as well, and you're not going to regret that. This is a very strong character. It's just that unfortunately, he does lag behind a lot of the other meta characters, and therefore he is not going to be in that upper echelon of the uber tiers along with the rest of those characters. And if he is there, he's not going to be there for very long because he's at the tail end of that group. And really, to be honest with you guys, it's really weird for me to say that when you're seeing the numbers you're seeing with this character, but he is very wonky and his kit is just very all over the place and he lacks a lot of the things that you would normally want to see. But even with that being said, extremely solid, really good character. It's just that he does lack a lot of those things, and therefore it really is worth mentioning those because it's very important to note. So in general, that is going to be Bison, you guys. Again, not the worst character in the game, but not the best character in the game. And I would say not even close to being the best character in the collab, to be honest. He's just kind of one of those characters that Netmarble decided to do some weird stuff with. Maybe they were experimenting, and I don't think it necessarily paid off. But anyway, you guys, let me know in the comment section what you think about this character. Do you have him? Have you built him? Do you like him? Do you not like him? Let me know in the comment section because I know he is very controversial for a lot of people out there. But at the end of the day, those are just my opinions on this character. Let me know yours in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on your way out. And I will see you guys in the next one. Y'all take care. Peace.
Continue.